So, just introduce Amacx pronounced Amacx with a CX and not Amacx. So Amacx is a Dutch brand developed in the Netherlands with some very smart sports scientists and collaboratively with one of the best teams in the world, Visma Pro Cycling Team. Currently also used by EF Education and also Pinarello Q36.5. So lots of collaborative work to really arrive at a range of products that made fueling simple. So when we're fueling, full disclosure, I have dumbed down some of these concepts to be really simple just because that's how my brain works. And if I visually see something, I can understand it better. So for me, in order to understand fueling, it was really important to go back to the beginning. And so where do carbohydrates come from and how do they exist in nature and biology? So basically, to understand biology, carbohydrates are produced in the plant. Where the sun produces its rays and enters the leaves, and through photosynthesis takes CO2 plus H2O, water, and produces glucose plus O2. So essentially, carbohydrates come from the sun entering the plant. Through the process of photosynthesis, they produce the fundamental parts of the energy cycle or biology in all living animals. So glucose for your Krebs cycle, your energy cycle, and obviously oxygen to breathe. So then if you understand that glucose is produced in the plant, basically everything that's in the seed was designed to germinate. And so germination requires the max amount of energy. And so everything that's seed-based is high in glucose or starch. And so in nature, it's designed that when the seed gets into the ground, it germinates and creates a plant with a maximum amount of energy. And so glucose to glucose bonds are starches. And as they create the plant, they form various other kinds of bonds in the plant. The most notable one we need to understand is that when glucose moves through the plant and when it goes into the fruit, it makes a slightly sweeter compound called fructose. So fructose is slightly sweeter so that the animals or the birds will eat it and then go poop the seed out somewhere else and create another plant. And so essentially fructose is the marketing for the plant. And so glucose becomes fructose, and then you have these glucose fructose molecules called sucrose, which is essentially sugar. So if you understand that the basis of carbohydrates are glucose and fructose as they're designed in nature. And so essentially, if you understand that those are the two molecules that the body requires to make energy, then you understand that there's two mechanisms in the gut that allow glucose and fructose through independently. Historically, products would rely very heavily on the glucose protein receptor. And if you understand that glucose can only pass through this door at one molecule at a time, if you overwhelm the protein receptor, the glucose would back up in the gut. And historically, that's what would cause the gut irritation, feeling nauseous, running to the bathroom, and yeah, this feeling of like uncomfortable bowels, and so we had a very poor association with gels and energy products, and so we would use them insufficiently. So then, if you understand, glucose can only pass through the receptor at 1 gram per minute, or 60 grams in an hour. You start to understand that the 60 grams is really the constraint on fueling. If you overconsume more than 60 grams of glucose in an hour, you're going to come unstuck. And so the 60 grams is really, really, really important to understand, because it's what set Amacx apart from other products, is the way that they have built out the product through both the glucose and the fructose protein receptors. So if you want to get more than 60 grams of carbohydrates into your system in an hour, essentially you have to flip it to the fructose protein receptor. And then this one, again, also drips at a similar rate. And then so over time, we've arrived at these 60 grams of glucose and 30 grams of fructose, or a 2-to-1 ratio. And that's really important to understand, because most sports nutrition products don't really get that right, or don't really haven't refined those 2-to-1 ratios as well as some of the good ones. And so then, if we understand that most untrained guts can assimilate up to 60 plus 30 equals 90 grams in an hour without any gut stress. And so most of us with a good quality product can assimilate 90 grams an hour without having to worry too much about getting sick. Nowadays, we're using a lot more carbohydrates. So high performance athletes or pro athletes will be using up to 120 grams. And in order to get to 120, you can't use the glucose protein, because that's already by and large satiated. And so you have to rely more on the fructose one. And so the fructose changes from 30 to 50, call it 50, 53. And that goes up to 67. And so you get this 1 to 0.8 ratio, which is the other ratio that we see on a lot of products. So 1 to 0.8 is designed to get to a maximum of 120 grams per hour. It's important to note that if you are going, like 90 is where most untrained guts can comfortably go. And if you're wanting to go more than 90 grams an hour, then you need to move to the 1 to 0.8 ratio to get to 120 grams or more. It's very, very important not to try to get over 90 grams with a 2-to-1, as you'll start to experience the accumulation of the overwhelming of the protein receptors, and potentially causing gut stress. So it's really important to understand that we're not evangelical about fueling, and that it's not a one-size-fits-all system, and that it is you can experiment and see what really works for you. It is still possible to use this less than 120 grams per hour with a 0 to 1.8 ratio. So me personally, I prefer to use the turbo line or the 0 to 1.8, just because I prefer the high fructose environment. And so even if I'm not doing 120 grams, I'll still use exclusively the 0 to 1.8 ratio. Fueling is absolutely unique to everyone, and so it's important to understand that the way you assimilate products may vary from person to person. Typically, if you're a high performance athlete, or to reframe it, if you're an athlete that can work at a high percentage of VO2 max for a long period of time, the high fructose 0 to 1.8 ratio may work slightly better. And if you're your average recreational weekend warrior and you're running at a relatively low intensity, the 2-to-1 ratio and 90 or even less at some points will be absolutely sufficient. Low intensity equals low energy requirement. High intensity equals high energy requirement. So the harder you pedal, or the harder you run, or for longer, the more calories you're gonna burn at a higher rate. And so if you were riding at a really low intensity, an ultra distance running race or an ultra distance riding race, you're not burning at a very high rate, but you're still burning. And so you can play with the ratios to be slightly less than 90, or slightly, or move to the 120 plus environment. So basically, the rule of thumb is I'm working very hard relative to my VO2 max, and so then I would go turbo line and 0 to 1.8, or I'm working well below my VO2 max, and you could quite comfortably use the 2-to-1 ratio, less than 90 grams for a long period of time without any gut irritation. Because the importance here is that you can assimilate or consume as many carbs as you can or need without any gut irritation, and so it removes the need to figure nutrition out, because it's no longer a variable. And so if you understand that I'm working hard, use a lot, hard for long using high ratio, easy for long using low ratio.